All right, I mean, I can, it being 7:35, I will open the meeting. And, for everybody's edification, this meeting is being recorded. Okay, you want to do an update of some kind, and it's,
If you have something to ask about, I could talk about that first and then I could jump into it. I don't have a lot.
Yeah, so it was a few meetings back, is Rich Wallner had brought up in the select meeting that we've been kind of avoiding him and not setting up a meeting. So, we, like, Jeff, I talked, with Jeff, and I'm like, 'cause Jeff was at the meeting and that's what he said, and I'm like, we pretty much said we're open to meeting anytime. I mean, the first ones were like right before the town meeting, so we didn't have any slots, but I thought I've had it in my notes, like, when are we having a discussion with them? I'm not eager to have it, I'm gonna be honest with you, but I absolutely want to make it much clear on the record. I am not shying away from the meeting into, I think it'll be constructive, everyone can give their positions and be respectful and all that kind of stuff, so I just want to make sure they know.
Jan McNeil, had from, the select board
Yep.
secretary had mentioned to me today that they discussed, this came up last night,
Yep.
and she had asked if we could come up with a few dates over
Sure.
the next few weeks to offer as possible available times to schedule a joint meeting. So I guess now would be a great time to do that.
Yeah, so what's, the way we kind of left it, is it to, were they gonna come here, were we gonna go there, like, what is everybody cool with?
I don't think it really matters, but I think I would rather us go there.
You would, okay.
Yeah, only because they seem to have, they seem to have a lot more interest in this than we really. So if they, we'll give them a chance to, because what the other thing is on air, live.
Yeah, I get that, but at the same rate, we're the governing body, elected body that was given this. If they have a question to me, they should come to us.
I think this is an information gathering thing about where they stand and where we stand and whether or not this is something we should move forward on. But also,
A couple of off weeks, like a Tuesday or a Monday that are in between the normal meeting times.
I'd be good with that, because I just think their agenda is usually pretty packed. They go to 11 o'clock at night. This could go on for a pretty long time if everyone, wants to have, be heard and give their point of view. I can imagine the discussion will go on for quite a bit of time. So I think it should be given that kind of time. And that doesn't seem, based on the meetings that I've watched, like that amount of time doesn't seem to work with the typical select board meeting.
I understand, but I firmly believe that we should do this in their meeting, so that not just us, but the general public can hear where they're going with this, and maybe get some.
So they won't see where they're going with it
So they
in our
will.
meeting. Our meetings are recorded and.
Yeah, but how many people watch them?
Well, that's up to them to do it,
If they don't really understand I just feel
Well, it's kind of like saying the same thing, like why does only, 100 people show up for a town meeting, with all the residents we have in the town, but.
this might be a little more of an issue than one thinks, and that's why I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, I heard some of the arguments with the water line and, the sewer line and all that, but. Yeah, I just think you're ceding control of of the measure to, another elected board that doesn't have jurisdiction over it. But wants to take it, but you're already ceding that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, 17 Anthony Road's going.
You are by symbolism at the very least, that what gets exchanged in that meeting will be identical, whether it's, here in this. CPC or there, it's gonna be the optics of it. The optics is they're gonna be sitting around this table kind of in charge, and we're the subordinates that are trying to explain why we voted a certain way. Like, I don't think we owe the select board that deference. It's not a disrespect thing, but I think we're the ones, we were elected too.
Yeah, the side by concern wasn't for the, Board of Selectmen, so it's just my hope was to get the word out there to people, as many people as possible.
Right, well, they can put it on their agenda in saying that they're visiting the CPC, on the next date or whatever, but to me, it's like, this is public recorded just as much as the select board is. And to me, this is, it's our issue, so.
Well, I don't really care, I mean, but I guess it would be better that way.
I'm sure others on the select board would agree with you, but I'm not sure the others that are not present right now can't speak up. But I get a sense like they would strongly disagree with your position. Okay.
Well, okay, we can bring it,
And that totals 3 to 5.
It doesn't, so, and there's the whole.
How does Jeremiah?
Well, I know Jeremiah's position probably, but.
If I may share my quick on that, I kind of see it both ways. Sense that I like the idea of it being at their meeting because it kind of puts the onus on them that, you know, they kind of take the initiative of it.
I want to thank you very much.
Formally part of their agenda and recognize as such. Practically speaking, I don't like the idea of getting tied into one of their marathon meetings. And I like the idea of us being able to control it better in our environment. And I think maybe lastly, an equally important part is getting down on paper in advance what the talking points are going to be and asking them to frame that since they're the ones who want to take it up. So kind of putting, using the advanced talking points as the way to kind of put it on their plate to really drive it forward in terms of whether it's at their meeting or ours. Ultimately, I don't think it matters too much, but my 2 cents.
Yeah, so I think Jeremiah, you're right in the sense. I think what they should clearly just define what they want to talk about and have some bullets or whatever. To me, it seems like you're asking us to come there or be here or whatever. What are the issues? What is your argument for them? Make that argument. Like, are we just going to wait until they show up and have that discussion, or can they give us some of those points in advance?
I would respectfully point out that we've asked for that 2 or 3 different times, if they would give us some idea of what it is that they want in writing, and that they've not done it yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I would, and Jeremiah being an attorney, I think can appreciate that's how it's kind of done in his world. I mean, I just think that makes sense to what are your points, and that allows us to at least be prepared. But because I'm not sure, I just find like it's putting us in a defensive position where I don't think we necessarily need to be that way. I don't think we would do that to them and put them in that same position. Like, why did you vote that way? We want you to come here on some matter that has something to do with planning. We want all of you and the select board to come to our meeting and sit on this side of the table and explain yourselves. I mean, just think about it. If you turn the tables, it's kind of ridiculous. And that's no matter what side you're on the position, because I see, plus, believe me, I see positives on both sides of this. We voted or kind of agreed to maybe withdraw this thing, but that does not make me a no, overall. I'm just saying on what we were proposing, I was struggling with it, but it doesn't make me a no, so.
Well, my biggest concern about the whole thing is that the building inspector has kind of made it clear that there's only just so much that we can do. We can't really get to where for some reason or other, he doesn't seem to believe we can even get to where Reading is. So if we can't get that far for some reason, I don't know if the state laws have changed since Reading put theirs together, to the point where we have something that actually, if it was ever challenged, would stand up.
Seems like almost any challenge to any kind of planning stuff gets struck down almost. just on other examples, you
But
know.
we were proposing something far less intricate, far less intense than what Reading has as their standard procedure. So, you know, I don't understand why the opinion was that we couldn't do it.
Right.
There wasn't gonna work.
Well, maybe the select board could come back with the reasons they think it would be good and or why it would
There are-
over back
there
to the law.
There are some really significant differences between Reading and North Reading in that we need to have conditions in there for septic systems.
Right,
You got a
yeah.
4-bedroom home, you got a 4-bedroom septic system, you can't add something on without changing the septic or moving one of the bedrooms into the ADU or something like that, so.
That's a fair,
So
yeah,
Reading is got through it all and through. No, that issue doesn't exist.
right.
So I mean, we do have some different things. But
That's probably one of the biggest ones, right?
well, yeah,
For a site.
yeah.
Or,
So I mean, I don't.
whereas, you know, you don't have that restriction.
The building inspector is obviously going to be the one that deals with this. And he doesn't seem to have, he's not lost of interest in.
Well, yeah, I'm sure Jerry does this thing no matter what, but I mean, I think,
Well, Russell made very valid points. I mean, the state law doesn't limit you until you get to a very quite a ways down the road.
right, yeah,
So I mean, how you get to the final step, you know?
right.
So,
And he's done a lot of research
yeah.
with
yeah.
meeting the state and the governing body and, you know, he's had a lot of communication on what he can and can't do and.
Well, what we can do is ask one more time if they want to give us something, you know, something in writing, but maybe just. Did you talk to Leanne about this?
No, I just spoke with, Jen, you know, their secretary, who said that, oh, it was, because I just said, how did the select board meeting go? And she said, oh, they did discuss, the ADU, and, they've asked if I could, you know, if we could ask for some dates to hold that joint
Yeah.
meeting.
I think the thing to say is, clearly the reason you're asking for this meeting is because you disagree with the decision, right?
They didn't put it that way to me at all.
But why would they have a meeting if they agreed with it? Or like, oh, we wanted to have you to come tell us why we follow it.
They are interested in trying to
Yeah.
move the issue forward in some way to see that,
Right.
you know, if there can be a resolution
And that's-
on it.
But that's totally fair.
Right.
I'm just trying to be like, stay at a high level. It's like clearly they're bringing us because they don't agree with the decision. Not all of them, maybe a couple of them, even if it's one of them, but because of that, why don't you just tell us these are some of the reasons we feel it's, you know, it is necessary and whatever it is, to Warren's point where we've made the request before, that would probably help. But as far as setting up the meeting, that's kind of a separate thing, but if they could preemptively give us some information.
Oh, I can definitely, sure, I can ask them for that. I also, do you want to look at the calendar? And
Yeah,
see if
absolutely.
there's dates we
Yeah,
can
sure.
offer?
I'm not sure, like, we don't have the others here, but we can at least start that and throw it out to them,
Yeah,
right?
why don't we start with a couple of Mondays and Tuesdays on off weeks? Maybe, just as a suggestion.
Sure.
Because I do think their agendas are pretty packed coming up. And I think because they asked me for dates, that means they weren't gonna say, oh, can you guys come on such and such date at their meeting?
Right.
Okay, so how about, what if we looked at? We are next meeting on November 7th. So what about the dates of the 13th or the 14th, that Monday or Tuesday the following week?
I'm good either one.
Lauren or Jeremiah, would those work for you?
Yep, it was okay by me.
Okay, and then if that does not work, we're getting close to Thanksgiving, so why don't we suggest a couple dates after? Our December meeting would be December 5th. Then December 11th or 12th, does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, why don't I start with those 4 dates, and, you know, if they had a strong opinion about whether it should be at one meeting or the other, or if we do, we can continue that discussion certainly. But I can offer those dates as well. And I can also ask for a couple of points about their level of interest in moving forward and their hopes for having this meeting.
There, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Close, do you want me to do the minutes?
Sure, they want to do that.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I move that the Committee Planning Commission vote to accept the minutes dated October 3rd as written.
Seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Do a roll call vote, so Jeremiah?
Aye.
And myself is aye, and Dave? is
Aye.
Okay. We have Zoom, we have to roll call vote.
I can give my two very quick updates now if you want.
Okay, yeah.
I wanted to just bring up is more of a scheduling question. I know I just said our next meeting was going to be November 7th, but there's a city election that day, and so because of that, some boards and commissions don't meet. I asked the town clerk's office if there's a recommendation about that. She said if it could impact anyone who may own property in North Reading or who has interest in any of the projects who may have a city election that they are voting in, that could potentially be an issue. She said it's really up to us. The Economic Development Committee has decided not to meet that night just because if there's any controversy about it, it just, want to make sure everyone can access our meeting.
Well, why don't we wait to see if we have anything else on that night?
Okay, as of right now, the next public hearing application we've received is for a site plan review, and they'll be on November 21st. So we've received nothing new for November 7th, but if you want to wait until the end of the meeting and we can decide whether we have any business, we can make a decision then. Okay. And then I just wanted to let you know I'm working on on writing an RFP for the 7 St. Teresa property, which I was hoping to draft, maybe bring to our next meeting for discussion, and then if it seems okay to everyone, let's see again. If it seems, like it works for us, I was going to give that to the select board and see if if they wanted us either to come and discuss it, or if they wanted to review it, or what the next step would be, because ultimately they would need to decide to accept that RFP or not. So
Okay.
working on that.
Sounds good.
That's about.
Look forward to see how it all works out. Hopefully,
Yeah.
you get well something.
Thank you. Oh, I guess I heard from the state, this is something the engineering department had managed the last time we did it, but the MVP plan that the state requires to be eligible for the municipal vulnerability preparedness grant funding, we will need to redo ours soon, and they've really changed the standards for how it's done. So that's something that we're eligible for grant funds, which I think the town was looking at possibly asking for some money for the culverts that are, failing right now, because that was named in our previous MVP plan. But in the meantime, we're eligible to ask for project funding, just to be aware that next year we're in for a new planning process, which I will be learning more about and letting you know. So that's all I've got for you.
Well, is there anything anything major in the plan change, or do you know yet?
It has more of a focus on climate change from what I understand, but I haven't really delved into what different tasks there are or what they expect. They say it's not so much a traditional planning document that it's been in the past. It is more of a series of categories where they ask what our activities are going to be, but I should learn more before I say more, because I don't want to tell you the wrong thing, but it is a different format. It is a bit of a different process.
Yeah, I can understand why it would change for climate, because I was gonna say there was no reason to change the prior format, except for climate change is probably one of the reasons to change it, so.
And I think we're maybe expanding the categories a little bit in terms of thinking about municipal vulnerability preparedness. I think they're thinking of it as a little bit more as far as some of the social problems, like whether it's affordable housing or other types of vulnerabilities that people might have. It's just a little bit broader than it used to be with strictly environmental issues.
Good.
Oh, and I guess the very last thing, I have on and off been working with New England Civil Engineering. I don't know if you remember, but we had an amount of money appropriated for looking at our subdivision regulations,
Right.
and also the engineering department's looking at the stormwater regulations. But we're doing it side by side, and it has taken a while because both of those sets of regulations are being looked at. And I have been given some suggestions. It's been a slow process because I think the priority has been on the stormwater bylaw and making sure the town is compliant with our MS4 permit. But I think soon, maybe over the next few months, we should probably plan to start having discussions about what some of the recommended changes would be.
Are these changes that the state are making in the stormwater bylaw?
There are changes that the state are making. I think that there's some standards that have already been out there that are things that the state would kind of like us to start, and it's not just state, but it's also federal because it's, as far as like NIMBY's.
I know they've updated some of the stormwater totals as far as how much rain we have in a particular period of time. So that updating is definitely going to would probably affect our stormwater bylaw, since I think our bylaw predates any of those changes.
Yeah, that may be. I think also some of the things that they ask us to consider are, one of the things that was pointed out to me by the consultant was that having an acre of disturbance as the threshold for having to meet our stormwater bylaw is a really big threshold, and that lots of communities are doing a much smaller size now because of the flooding problems that are happening, and they just want to ask communities to have a more stringent standard. I mean, it's still up to the town. It's just, I don't think we're being required to do it, but it's been suggested that it would help us manage our stormwater, situation better. Some things like that. They would encourage us to look at our subdivision regs and try to see where we can reduce some of the pavement that we require. We do require a lot of pavement, and I know that that's controversial. So it's something we're going to have to discuss as far as weighing any public safety concerns with, other types of concerns versus the prevention. I will keep you posted on that. If you continue to work on it, it's been slow, but it's been a while since I brought it up.
Thanks.
Okay. We have a few more minutes before we can reopen the public hearing on 17 Anthony Place with our hero. But we'll just have a few minutes here and open on time. Well, my iPad says we're on time.
Yeah, it should be over one.
Yeah. I guess we don't have to go by that clock. All right, so I will reopen the public hearing on 17 Anthony Road and 346 Haverhill Street. So do you have any updates on? Okay.
Yeah, sure. So Bill Hall with Civil Design Consultants, for the record.
Thank you.
Since the last hearing, we've gone to Conservation Commission and we've received an approval from them. So that's taken care of. We've received that order of conditions and it's ready to be recorded. And then I believe the only outstanding question we had from the last hearing was that section of 10-inch pipe that's in Anthony Road. And what happens if that goes from a 10-inch pipe to a 12-inch pipe? Well, it does increase the capacity of it when you go from a 10-inch to a 12-inch. What ends up happening is the next 12-inch pipe immediately downstream is only, I believe it's 0.8% slope, something like that. It's very flat, and that ends up backing up. So you're letting more flow go through the 10 into the 12, and it just backs up the next 12-inch pipe that's downstream, because that 12-inch pipe also has a catch basin that connects into it that receives additional flow. So it doesn't improve the system in any manner. It just takes the surcharge from that 10-inch pipe and transfers it to the next section of 12-inch pipe. So that's what happens when it goes from the 10 to the 12. I believe that's the only question we had from the last hearing. Other than that, we have received the draft conditions. I believe we're fine with everything that's in there. So I'd like to open it up to your discussion.
Okay, thank you. Well, I understand exactly the pipe situation. Just it moves the problem from here to here. The fact that there's currently a problem there, that doesn't change if we leave it the way it is.
Yeah.
And if you move it down, I don't know if there's any collateral issues that happen by moving it down to the other catch basin. I don't know if you can answer that question or not. Obviously it changes because of the limited slope in that, and the next 12-inch pipe would definitely slow down going through that pipe stream. So what else goes into that catch basin? In other words, is there a situation where by moving the slowdown from down to that next catch basin, does it then surcharge other pipes leading to, or is the only pipe coming out of that catch basin that 1 12-inch that continues on?
So there's a small pocket of wetland. I'm looking at sheet C2 right now, but there's a small pocket of wetland that's to the north of the catch basin that's immediately upstream of the existing 12-inch pipe. And there's another 12-inch pipe that goes from that wetland complex in the north into that catch basin. So I suppose you could be surcharging more into that wetland complex rather than surcharging out of the catch basins that are in the street. That could be the consequence of going from a 10 to a 12 in that area. But otherwise, you have the 10-inch pipe going into that catch basin, and then a second 12-inch pipe from the wetland going into that catch basin, and then 112 going out of it. And that goes to a manhole that diverts into a 15-inch pipe.
Right. Well, it sounds to me like if you that you don't know the exact consequences of letting it back up in the second catch basin, and it could in fact push water back up into that wetland. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I believe it would surcharge into that wetland because it
And
appears.
that wetland is in some people's backyards, and so that's probably
Yes.
not a good plan.
Yeah, it appears that the rim on that catch basin is above the wetland elevation, which would make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Any questions from the board? Carolina, anything or Dave?
Well, I mean, as to the point, I saw Steve Sawyer's from GM2's letter addressing that subject, and it seemed he echoed what Bill had said. So I
think it's a good idea. Yeah. Jeremiah.
Nothing at this time.
Okay, all right. Then I'll open it up to the public. If there are any further questions or on what we've looked at so far, or on the conditional approval. Any comments or questions? Yes.
Brian Hashey, can you explain to the people what 3 options you have in this submission? You can deny, you can approve with conditions. Are those still in effect?
Yeah. Yeah, any changes or any conditions that are put on tonight become part of the approval.
I'm not going to presume to know what your disposition is, but in the waivers that they requested, you
We haven't
have
done the waivers yet. We haven't done the waivers yet.
so you're going to individually do that first?
Absolutely, one at a time.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Andrea Paluca, 15 Anthony Road. Just with respect to, you were talking about the plans and wetlands and the pipe. Could you just, perhaps, Mr. Hall, if you could just identify the number, which road you're referring to which wetlands, which number residences? That's
Sure.
behind. If you have the diagram in front of me.
So the 10-inch pipe goes between two catch basins. The upstream catch basin is located right at the property line of 13 and 11 Anthony Road. The downstream catch basin is located closer to the property line of 9 and 7 Anthony Road. And there's a wetland complex between 9 and 7 that goes up across 346 Havel Street and 346 R Havel Street. So the 10 inches between 11 and 9 Anthony Road, there's a section of 12-inch that goes from a catch basin to a manhole that's right between 9 and 7. So that's the general area we're talking about.
Right, and then across the street is wetlands behind the house there. And wouldn't that eventually impact that, those wetlands as well? I think it's,
Across from to the south of Anthony Road.
yes, that little cut through Victoria.
I think she's talking about like 16, 16 Anthony Road where when you're coming up to the left on that corner and that behind there's always flooding.
So would it impact that?
Does that water go that way towards Peter?
The water from that system does go down towards Peter Road, but as it is now, it surcharges well before that. It surcharges between 11 and 7 Anthony Road.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Jeff Jones, 16 Anthony Road. I just have a question with some clarification that I was looking at the portal yesterday. And it appears that there's been, I guess, some discussion that hasn't been taking place at the public hearing about the catch basins being potentially maintained by an HOA. And I had previously asked a question about this, I think probably several public hearings ago, about long-term maintenance of the catch basin. And I think at the time we had talked about the town's success in maintaining those. And I just didn't know if you could provide some more clarity on that in terms of what discussion was held, why there's been a change, or if there's going to be a change. I did email, I think, the town engineer and CC Danielle on that to get more clarity, because it seems to me that I guess the criteria that was used for the town to potentially be okay with an HOA is that they have a small fleet and they can't take on any more work, I guess. That's the impression that I got. So my question is, what's the criteria for this? And if that's the way we're gonna go, I mean, obviously we have concerns about an HOA maintaining it. I do anyways, I shouldn't speak for anybody else, but do we have any, I guess, perspective on that? And also, you know, I guess my concern is, North Reading's done a lot of subdivisions that probably have catch basins. Does the town sort of pick and choose what they want to maintain, or, you know, we want to maintain this, we don't want to maintain that, or is there some kind of criteria that they maintain all of them, or what's the situation? The detention basin. I'm saying detention basin. So,
Okay.
a lot of questions in there,
I mean,
but
I know it's full answers here, but you want to tell? Okay.
Sure. So the reason this discussion came up recently is because initially when we first started reviewing the project, the town engineer had mentioned to me, as our previous town engineer had mentioned to me also, that the town has a lot of difficulty taking on new stormwater structures that are located on private property. Some towns do it, but it's more typical to not do it and to require that they be privately maintained. Previously, we have always taken it on. When streets are accepted in subdivisions, the town then accepts the responsibility for the drainage that goes along with it, whether it's on public or private property. And the last couple of town engineers have found that to be pretty problematic. A lot of communities don't accept new subdivision roads at all because they really consider that having that quite a bit of extra work in maintenance and, you know, taking care of more infrastructure is more than the town has ever really planned or bargained for. They still allow the streets to be built, but it's usually a requirement that they're privately taken care of. Anything in the public way, engineering department is fine with having the DPW maintain and take care of, but for those that are located on private properties, rather than taking an easement and taking on the maintenance themselves. It has been their preference for these last couple of years. Almost every old subdivision has the requirement that the town take it, and they've really pushed us to stop doing that, because it's pretty taxing on the DPW.
So as a follow-up to that, I guess,
Well, if I may, a shorter answer would be, if you look into conditional approval, it requires the formation of an HOA, and that they have the responsibility to maintain those structures, those drainage situations, and those catch basins, detention ponds, that are on their private property. And the homeowners association is going to be responsible to take care of that. Now, it's really not really a major job. I mean, the maintenance of the detention ponds, mowing or cutting or something. So it's not a huge thing. So, but it is something that needs to be done, and we have struggled with keeping up with some of them, because when there was only a few, it was one thing, but as we got more and bigger, it did become a problem for the DPW. So we evolved into this. I guess is the best way to answer it.
yeah, I guess my concern would be, sounds like it's not that big of a deal, but it's big enough of a deal that the town doesn't want to do it, right? Because I guess it's getting to be too many. So I don't know. I mean, to me, I think, obviously all we've been talking about is water, right? It's all we've been talking about is water.
It's just not one big one. It's a whole bunch of small ones. So, and this one is another small one.
Yeah, it's if you look at what maintenance of those detention ponds, 4 bays, it's annual mowing, clearing debris out of them. If there's any sediment deposits at the end of the outflow, it's like a landscaper kind of,
Yeah.
it's people that put a different kind of hat on, but it's a landscaper duty. It's just the town just doesn't have the ability to do that. So I want to be clear too, because you did say like catch basins. It's not catch basin. I know that was just the nomenclature, but
Yeah,
just for anyone else, I know you get it,
right.
but it's just these, basically earthen structures, they're not like within the right of way and the sidewalks. It's all that's the town. It's out in the field where you see a discharge into a 4 bay or a detention pond or whatever. That's what we're talking about, having a maintenance program in place. It's like hiring a landscaper that's qualified to do those kind of cleanings and maintenance.
These are the things that we're talking about that are filling up with water with the plastic liners and discharging water to the pipes, right?
Well, can be those subsurface chambers too, if they are not in the right of way.
I would think we'd all agree that that's the key thing to mitigating the water, right? So we're gonna get it over to an HOA that if there is a problem, we now have to go to HOA and, right? As I'm talking about from my perspective as a homeowner down on the bottom of the hill, right? So if there's a problem, and I'm assuming there's probably going to be, but I'm sure you would tell me that there isn't, but I'm assuming in the worst case scenario, there is gonna be one, and I'm gonna have to go back to an HOA and say, yeah, you gotta, mow the lawn this year and it's gonna solve this problem. But what if the plastic line is cracked and it has to be ripped up and, they're charging $50 a month for an HOA that's gonna have no money to spend thousands of dollars to replace it. I don't know. To me, I would feel more comfortable with the town doing it because at least I have some kind of recourse, but it sounds like that ship has sailed, so, for the record, not a fan.
I think we're just following kind of what the town engineer, what the best practice of the town is, what they've done, which is they don't take on those structures.
I think it would have been nice to know that, not the day of the vote, I guess. We knew that, we could have been discussing that probably over the last
And then this draft.
8 months, 9 months.
Yeah, the draft has been out for quite a while. Yeah.
I think that is on the town engineer's memo is so recent is because it was something he mentioned early on. And when we're in the final stages of
You wanted-
drafting the
right.
conditional approval, I go back to each department to say, are all your issues dealt with? Are all your issues dealt with? And so sometimes a couple of things, loose ends may come up that were never formally. So he had not provided them to us.
I understand. I would say it's pretty loose end to the last day, but for the record.
Yes,
Thanks, Andrea, tell you guys a follow-up to that, 2 questions. Who will do or conduct the inspections at that point? Does the town at least look at these retention ponds annually? And is this the first time that there has been a shift to an HOA, or are there others that have already shifted and they've been successful, or can you at least identify how many?
Yeah.
And at what point, 5 years ago, this has been the new trend,
To
or?
figure out how many, we'd have to go back and do research on that to find out how many others.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are some subdivisions where the roadway has not been accepted, and it will never be accepted because it wasn't necessarily built to the exact standards of, the town subdivision rules. Dogwood Lane is one of those subdivisions. That maintenance will always be done by an HOA. That will never be accepted. And if the town were to take on the cost of that, it would be pretty big. And that HOA has really big bills because it's a really complicated system. We do have any unaccepted subdivision. Rebecca's Row is one. There are a number of them are in town that are unaccepted. I don't have a list, but actually the town engineer and I were just talking about the need to kind of compile, because we have to go pretty far back to, the 60s and 70s and on and make a list, which we do plan to do that. I think it would be helpful to know, but there are a number of them around town where they have to be privately maintained, but each of these has an operation and maintenance plan in their stormwater plan, and there's a responsible party, and that responsible party is the developer until such time as the HOA is formed. And then, in some of them, if the road is ever accepted, it becomes the town, and if the road is not accepted, then it, stays with the HOA. But there are a number of HOAs around town that have been doing this. They are required to, report on their maintenance. I know there are some around town that haven't necessarily done it because they haven't had maintenance issues at all, but that is what they're supposed to do.
In this particular case, we're talking about.
I'm sorry, you have to identify yourself.
Sorry, Jeff Jones, 16 Anthony Road. In this particular case, we are probably thinking about that it would be a town road at some point, but these catch basins or whatever the right terminology is are on private land. That's it. Okay.
Right. And if I can just say too before, so Andrea, just to be clear, so the town's in charge of inspecting all the way until they're accepted, the development is accepted, then it gets handed off to the HOA. They'll do the maintenance of it, and then from what I understand, it's 2 reports annually. So every 6 months they have to do a report, and that is what Daniel's saying is first filed with the town. And as she said, whether or not they do it, enforcement, I'm not really is sure about, but that's what the requirement is.
To the town engineer.
To the town engineer.
So there are some that is a public way, yet the retention pond is a private.
Private property.
There are some that are out there. Could you identify a street? I'm just curious. I want to do a drive-by. I just don't know where.
What detention pond that belongs to, that the town is maintaining?
Yeah. No.
That's the private.
Similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah, this setup, I guess.
Steve Corsetti, 11 Anthony, there's 2 on the way here,
Okay.
both off of North Street, Agatha and George Route, and they both look like the town forest.
That's correct.
So whoever maintains them is not maintaining them.
And public way.
I don't know the exact status of the road, but those are 2 retention ponds that are not.
Those have both public here. Hang on 1 second, please.
I'm sorry, that person's name is still, sorry. I'm sorry, what was your name?
Mine, Steve Corsetti, 11 Anthony.
Gentlemen in the back.
Bill Lewis, 24 Anthony Road. So kind of turn this the other way. One of the last meetings I mentioned that my belief was there's water that comes from, here we go with all of this, numbers, 23 Anthony Road on that side of the street, makes its way under the road and ends up in between the houses of Anthony and Peter Road. And they're going through Danielle, and the town engineer verified that that's the case. He called it a stub line, which comes out of that little swale area in 23 and ends up in the back of the 4 houses on Anthony and Peter Road, and he called it an outfall area. So I know in their drainage plan, they had 2 distribution points, 1 and 2 up the street. One comes down Richard Road, which is the one I was just talking about, and the other is Victoria Road. And I'm wondering if Victoria Road is doing the same thing, that there's something coming that's going under the town infrastructure and then ending up, because like someone's already said, if you look at 6 Anthony Road and 8 Anthony Road, and those areas back there, there's a lot of water that shows up. And it may not be on these plans, and maybe it should be, because that would be a case of it's going underneath the public infrastructure and ending up in private property. directly coming or indirectly coming from the town drainage lanes, which they're gonna put more water into. So I think someone had to answer that, if that's, it's gonna make this worse, or what's going on. That's something that, I know the town engineer said in the back, it's supposed to be, he called it a private setup. And I know there's been problems there before. And then somehow the water gets there and just makes its way into Peter Road and eventually into the wetlands and back on the other side of Peter Road, by the good school. So this doesn't seem to show up on the town maps right away. So someone who's been here for 40 years goes, oh, do you remember that? So I just think it's all part of this water loop, and it's what everybody's concerned about.
You have an answer for that?
Sure. So what we've received for records from the engineering department show two drainage systems, two closed drainage systems, one that goes down Anthony Road to the east, down across the side street, and then out behind Peter Road. The other one goes to the west, down another side street, and then out behind Peter Road. Nothing that we've located or any of the records that we've got from the engineering department had indicated that there are any stubs that go to the area between Anthony and Peter Road. So that's not anything that we've found in the field, and it's not anything the engineering department had in their records that they sent over to us.
Okay, so there's at least one there, and the town engineer verified. But yeah, I haven't got an answer back. If the same situation happens further up the street at Victoria Road. So I believe in one of Mr. Fowles' presentations, he mentioned the lines go 200 feet down Victoria Road and 200 feet down Anthony Road. 200 feet down those roads doesn't get you to the other side of Peter Road. The two properties on each side are 160 feet deep. So the 200-foot line ended up in the middle someplace. I think that has to be really investigated before things get worse.
We did locate the outfalls, and those are approximately 200 to 250 feet apart, but that's behind Peter Road, where the outfalls come out behind Peter Road.
Behind Peter Road, heading in towards the south side.
Yeah.
Do you mind showing?
I understand.
If you want to show him on the plan where you're talking about.
Yeah, I could show you.
I just want to keep it open here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there's something to do it on this. Yeah, really. So,
One day I'm doing black.
yeah, so we have, yeah, I know. We have Anthony Road here, yeah, Peter Road here.
Yeah.
Or this shows a little bit better, okay. So it goes, there's one section of pipe that goes here, down across here, and something like this, and then out. And then there's another stretch that goes down here, over here, and then out. Those are 200, 250 feet.
Okay, that's, I misunderstood you, but so there's nothing going on, because there's only a sewer line, or what do you want to call it? There's one at the end of Anthony, one at the end of Victoria, and then again at the Peter Road side. So there's nothing in the middle there.
Nothing we located, and
Okay.
nothing that the engineering department sent over to us. Yeah.
But just appears there is at least one. I'm guessing that 40 or 60 years ago when they built that, they may have built another one.
Yeah, that's hard to know, but that's obviously it's also an existing condition, you know, which is something that they would like if they could prove it if they had some kind of record on it. So, Ed, you had a question?
It's got the answer 25 Anthony Road. Getting back to the retention ponds that are on the roadway going up the hill, the one on the left has a pipe that's been added to it that drains back into the wetlands. The elevation of that opening that would go back, I can understand if it has to be for like an emergency overflow, okay, to help drain it off. But if it's the other way around, then the majority of the water is going to go into the wetlands and the minority of the water will go into the source system. That's one observation in all of this. That pipe has been recently added over time to that catch basin. The other thing is, in interfacing with the HMO group or HBO, whatever the homeowners association, who makes the determination of when it has to be serviced? Do they take it upon themselves to be responsible citizens and say, gee, has to be serviced, let me go pay for a landscaper.
Yeah.
Or does somebody point it out to them saying that has to be serviced? And what happens when there's a little scuffle between the two? We all have to go to court and fight it out, or how does that get resolved?
Well, they have to, as Dave said, they gotta file a report that they've looked it over and maintained it to some extent. Failure to do that for a period of time would certainly bring the town down.
Yeah, but is that kind of like the cutting of grass on a vacant lot that's too high? Is bylaws or something that kind of oversee that? Because I think if you go up to 17 Anthony Road right now, the grass is about 3 feet high.
Mhm.
And nobody seems to be dealing with that. So, my concern is oversight and how these forms, is it just a rubber stamp thing? Yeah, we did it. We gotta make sure, it's a very sensitive area. That particular wetlands is going to be landlocked now between a road and houses. And it's on a 24-foot downhill slope. So the water's not gonna go up the hill to the street, it's gonna come down the hill into the houses. And any additional water going into that wetlands really is, put a garden hose in my basement. It's unacceptable.
I believe that they've addressed this. There's pretty clear evidence for having done this for a long time that the engineering, and it's because it's not just one person doing it, it's being done and then it's being reviewed, by a peer review engineer to make sure that what was done is correct. And we found to be successful. I don't think that it's going to be as big of a deal. And generally we find an improvement in these situations. So, and you won't know that until it's done, of course, but.
I think what would help too is, at the time when they do establish an HOA, to get a representative and that number is shared with everybody, who that person is, the company is, whoever, that you can contact. Because just like the town, if you see an area that should be maintained, not being maintained, you need a number to call. Hopefully that would be the representative from the HOA. Now, if it's not, you're calling the town then, and you're calling the town engineers, and they're not maintaining these structures or this area, and then he'll take action. They should have either the reports or they'll have the name of the company. But from what I understand, from the ones I've hired, is they have a requirement to be licensed with Massachusetts in the ability to maintain, wetland structure systems. It's not just, I kind of made light of it as a landscaping practice, but I was more referring to the mowing and the maintenance of these open air structures. But because they're just, the town it doesn't have the resources to do that, but.
I'm just hoping the response isn't, there's nothing we can do about it, it's on private land.
Daniel could maybe speak to it, but I won't have to put you on the place, but I don't think that would be the response of the town. They know that the operation and maintenance plan would be in place and approved by the town, and it should, and it's in this agreement, by the way,
I don't think they can fail to do it without a penalty, some kind of penalty. And as soon as the homeowners start finding penalties being added up against their property, somebody's going to get something done. So there is a mechanism. So, yes, sir.
David Cook, 346 Harold Street. I just wanted to follow up from the last meeting. I brought up the idea of the water line that went down to Harold Street. And just looking back over documents, in 2015, when this, the applicant was before the board again, the water department denied the request because it wasn't properly waterlined, right? It was going in and out of Harold Street, in and out of Anthony Road, within 40 feet of each other. They decided that there was no additional flow there, it didn't make sense. The fire department was also on record in 2015 as saying, the looping of water mains for improved water distribution for both water quality and fire flows should be required. 2015, that was on record as something that the fire department, so we have water quality and also a safety issue as it relates to the fire department. And what's interesting is, if you go back to 2011, Mark Clark approved a looped water line for development from the same applicant that went down to Havel Street from Anthony Road out to Havel Street. He had 0 comments anywhere related to cost. It all came down to is what size a connection should be at each road. So we have a alternate that was accepted by the utility superintendent, same one that is here today. Mr. Pierce, you're on record as saying on October 18, 2011, Mr. Pierce stated, the commission also requires looping of water, which means that it has to come into the subdivision, then go out, where it's going to be picked up partway down the road. More circulation is cleaner water. So I am very, understanding of the fact that you're about to approve this project, but I just want to highlight that there is a viable option here. And again, the only request for the waiver is because a significant cost. So there is a viable option. The only reason, and again, the fire department you brought it up yourself in terms of health, in terms of the cleanliness of the water. The fire department is worried about actual fire flows. And you're gonna go ahead and approve this because there's a financial burden on the applicant.
I don't believe that's the case.
That's the request for the waiver. It's in writing for their waiver.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's exactly how we're looking at it. And we did talk to the water department. And again, every piece of infrastructure that you create needs to be maintained. Peter Road and Anthony Road are already one big loop. So you're not adding anything by connecting this one to that. You're not adding.
To Havel Street?
Yeah.
Well, you said Peter and Anthony Road. And I'm saying a loop toward line up to Havel Street, which was approved in 2011 by Mark Clark, and there was 0 comments about the additional cost to maintain.
I'm not sure where are you gonna loop it from where?
Anthony Road.
Yeah.
To Havel Street.
25.
They have a 20-foot piece of land that they own that goes out to Havel Street. That looped water line was approved in 2011 when the same applicant brought forth a plan.
I'm not the same applicant.
We went over this in one of the first meetings when a transfer of land came up. It was just
My
working.
uncle died in 2016, so I don't know what he did.
Okay, well, I'm just letting the board know that was approved in 2011.
I think the letter that we have from the water department right now kind of says it all. It's a subdivision rule to have this requirement for the loop. It's not a rule by or for the water department. The water department,
Nor for the fire department.
nor for the fire department, but the water department has made the decision, at least right now. They're looking at it, it's not necessary. They don't believe it's necessary. I don't think someone, again, one of our engineers from our town for the water department, if they thought we need a loop, they would definitely want a loop. And they're saying we don't need one. Now, as far as fire, the tee-off that you need, I understand and I respect what the fire, either prevention or whoever said it, but for residual pressure and static pressure on a line, it's going to be identical. The fact that it loops will not change either one of those things or flow. So I'm not sure. I'm sure Bill, did you do a flow test originally, right at where you're going to tee off, or you guys know the flows
I
there?
don't recall.
But it's not going to change by looping it.
In 2015, though, it was specifically denied because it wouldn't induce flow, the loop water line that they proposed, because it was so close to each other. But in 2011, there was a proposal that was accepted without any comments.
I mean,
So again, there is a viable option here, and as you know, and you're talking about cost, the answer should be come back with a road that is 500 feet and does not go beyond it.
Yeah, I don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is that if we create infrastructure that we don't need, somebody's gonna pay for it when it needs to be worked on. I think that's become, one of the town engineers from back in that time frame told me, don't put sidewalks on both sides, only one side, only put 24-foot roads in, et cetera, because he said every bit of infrastructure you creates a problem for the town. It becomes an issue. It becomes a cost for the town in the future. So you minimize it in order to, get what you need for safety and so forth. But don't build something that you don't need because it creates a maintenance issue.
You'd minimize 375 feet of water main by capping it at 500 feet. Which is the town rule.
Well, it's actually not a town rule per se. Again, it's in the rules and regulations for the subdivision control, not for the water department or the fire department or anybody else. Warren?
I just wanted to mention on the Zoom, there are also a couple people meeting.
All right. We got on Zoom here. Have a question from Zoom?
Joy and Bruce and Luke Legere.
Okay, Joy?
Yes, a couple things. According to your subdivision rules, there's supposed to be documentation of every test pit that's been dug on the property previous, where this has been before the board before. There's absolutely nothing as far as any of the previous test pits or sewage disposal pits. Okay, according to Mass DEP rules, there's supposed to be one test pit per acre. Okay, all the things on the paperwork, there's only 4 test pits listed. The town requires, I believe, 3 per infiltration basin. There's only 4 listed. Why is this stuff not on the plan? There's also, according to your rules, I'm not sure whether it's under water or septic, where they're supposed to determine high groundwater and what effect any future water on the property, which we've discussed. And we were told that that's not included in the stormwater report. So you got 750,000 gallons that are going to be added to this property, and the town requires a report on that. And I haven't seen a report on what it's going to do to the high water table. Another question is why was all the data taken 3 years ago instead of current? I realize it was filed 9 months ago, but the data should have been more current as far as stormwater issues. You know, these are all requirements that when you go to your website, you read them and they're not there.
Response to that, Bill?
Yeah, so we did 27 test pits on the site, and we've included all that information in our packages. It might not all be on the plan set, but it is in the application package.
They're called sewage disposal.
That correlates with the report.
I'm sorry.
If you have a drawing though that lists and shows all the
Yes.
CPs and that.
Yeah, so on the existing condition plan, sheet C2, we have test pits that are labeled test pit 1 through 25, and then we did some additional test pits a year later.
Labeled as soil disposal, not test pits, soil disposal. That's the exact wording on the top of the paper.
Yeah, that's Form 11. That's what you use for the Board of Health when we submit these for septic systems, because the Board of Health was out here to witness all of the test pits except for 622.1 and 622.2, because those are specific to the drainage areas. So there's no requirement to have a town witness there for the drainage areas. There is a requirement for the town to witness them for the septic systems. Each lot has 4 test pits and 2 perk tests that were witnessed by Alex Parker, who's a representative from the Board of Health.
Excuse me. If you read your writing, it's listed as sewage disposal.
There were
Okay,
test pits
in
that
bold
were-
letters, it says sewage disposal test pits are not acceptable.
What do you mean by that?
That's in bold letters in your own, on your own website. It's in bold print. Sewage test pits are not acceptable for test pits.
For test pits of what?
The test pits of what, yeah.
For the property, there's supposed to be 19 test pits, not sewage disposal test pits, test pits.
Now, test pits are test pits, regardless, the columns
It's listed
are
as
all
sewage
the same.
disposal.
You have to have a test pit, but to design a sewage disposal system.
I don't think he's arguing with that. He's saying you're not listing the storm water test pits. Is that what you're saying? Bruce?
That's correct. You've got it. And it says test pits for sewage disposal can't be used as test pits for stormwater issues. There's also supposed to be a stormwater report for, not
there's not-
stormwater, sewage report,
There's not a
which is
one-for-one.
water coming onto the property that's going to be discharged on the property.
Thank you, Bruce. No, I get that. I think that refers to, you can't get a 2-for-1 on a test pit. I mean, as Warren said, a test pit's a test pit. It's a excavator, backhoe, whatever, creating a hole in the ground that gets observed. And what Bill said is he had, Board of Health viewing the ones that were for septic, and then, so how many do you have that were not septic? You give the numbers there. You can just kind of repeat the numbers. How many are septic and how many are stormwater
Yeah, so-
related, or even just test pits in general? It's not a lot of them. Sometimes they're structural or whatever,
Yeah, so we have 27 was the number. And like I said, the first time we went out, we had the Board of Health witness the ones that were even stormwater just because he was there.
Right.
That's the only reason why. As far as stormwater specific, we do have a test pit in every basin. Yeah, so we've done test pits for every multiple test pits for these basins, just to confirm that.
And Bruce, is it your position or maybe the language in the town that there's supposed to be more than one per?
According to your town website, for every infiltration basin, they want 3 test pits with high water marks on each test pit.
So what do you say to that, Bill?
We did 27 test pits throughout the site, and they were all remarkably consistent from one end to the other. The only variation was when you approach the wetlands that are located to the western portion of the site, where there looks like there was a wetland that was dredged out for material. When you get close to the zone 2 line, that starts to turn to sand, which makes sense. The rest of the site was all consistent 3 to 4 feet to groundwater, to seasonal high water table from the test pits.
Yeah, there's kind of the in practice, there's the reg and then in practice, we've been seeing everything uniform. I mean, I've been in that situation. You don't keep the excavator there and keep digging and making,
And keep disturbing.
like Swiss cheese.
You want to keep your area that you can use, you want to keep it as pristine as possible.
Yeah, so I do get it.
My other question is on, and Warren, you know this for a fact, it's been before you numerous times. This, trying to develop the property. It also requires that any excavation or test pits be listed on these. There's not one there, and I'm not saying they did it. I know why they're requesting that any previous test pit be listed, is to make sure that's not where they dug before. And I'm not accusing anybody of playing any games or anything like that, but there's a reason why they wanted previous excavations. And it was
Good
done by
backgrounds.
the Germano
Yep.
family, the previous filings.
Sorry, Bruce. I was just asking Bill, did you have backgrounds or were you given backgrounds on the previous sites? So do you have any of that kind of information you got or?
No, we don't. I would presume that in the previous filings, those were provided to the town. The town has them on record to look up, much like we've provided them in our filing. But we don't have any of that information.
Well, that's one of the requirements that the town has. Apparently, somebody didn't do their due diligence.
Yeah, I think in practice, what should have happened is if we were aware of test pits previously, which I think there's history to suggest there would be, you would ask for that documentation from the town, do an overlay on your plan where you plan to put them down. So did you pre-flag all these 27 locations? Like or were you more, other than say the stormwater ones, were you just picking the spot generally kind of where you're gonna put?
Yeah, so
each field, or were these all kind of mapped out by a survey?
Well, we did a concept plan on it first, just to get an idea of where we have some house locations and potential field locations. And then went out and dug in that general area. And when I was going along, I would hang flags and write the number on each one. And then the survey crew went out afterwards and located those locations. And
Pretty much.
speaking to the previous test pits, even if we had that information, it's not information that I would like to use. We've used previous test pits before and been burned by it. So we always go out and do our own test pits, even if it's in the same area.
Well, I think what Bruce is referring to though is you cannot use the same location, so you wouldn't do that anyways per the regs. That's-
Yes, you have that correct.
Thank you, Bruce, for making me familiar with the regs. I didn't know that exact language, but yeah, that's what I think he's referring to.
The other big one is this water being discharged on the property through the septic system. There's a regulation both for water and septic, but I think the water one is if you're going to have wells. I think the septic one is if there's no sewage and how it's going to affect the groundwater on the property. That should have been a separate report. Knowing the amount of water issues we have here, and we've all heard about it and consistently heard about it, there should have been a full-blown hydrology report done on this. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, obviously you did a hydrology report, right? For, identify your catchment areas and where the water's going, right?
Yeah, we did a full drainage analysis on it, yeah.
So that was done.
The hydrology report?
Yeah.
Okay, did it include the 750,000 gallons that are going to be dumped on the property in a year or more? And that's not counting sprinkler systems.
Are you talking about from the septic system, the water?
Yes, you're providing town water that's going to be disposed of on the property. And that's what I believe your septic report is referring to, or it's the water report. There's two listings, one's for water and one's for sewage, how it's going to affect the property. And where water's the big issue, I would think it would probably be under the sewage report that you'd have to, basically it's a stormwater setup only for the affecting groundwater. And I don't think I've seen any report for that either, which is part of the town's requirement.
We talked about that in the beginning.
Yeah, we've discussed that in past hearings.
Yeah.
And
It's not a requirement, right?
exactly,
That's the
and
problem.
and we're meeting the regulations that are before us. And so we have a recharge requirement that must be met through the stormwater handbook and the stormwater regulations. That does not take into account sewage loading on the site. But we also have a requirement to provide a septic system because there is not sewerage, public sewerage available to the site. And we're designing that within the regulations that we have, meeting all the requirements of Title V.
There should have been a report on it.
That is, I can't remember having seen a report on that. I've asked that question, and I asked that question here.
Yes, you did,
Yeah.
Warren.
We looked back previously, because there was a question of if it came up in a previous subdivision. And what I believe had happened there is that subdivision was started prior to the stormwater handbook being enacted. And they didn't have recharge requirements before that. And then the stormwater handbook was enacted through the process, and they provided some more information on what they were recharging. There was no information on the sewage loading for that development either. I believe it was Mackenzie Lane, I want to say.
Don't
What's the name?
know.
McIntyre, that's it. Yeah, McIntyre.
Yeah, I asked the question to them too.
Yeah.
But are you saying that that there is a recharge requirement, that the septic system is part of the recharge requirement?
No, so we can't take the septic system loading into account with the recharge requirement. It has to be through stormwater recharge for us to meet that regulation.
And where does the roofing fall into where you're doing that on site, you're accepting, the roof?
Yeah, so the roof runoff is taken into account where we have a number of roof dry wells, so that's taken into account for our recharge volume
But that
on the
doesn't-
site.
So that does go into that line?
That does go into the volume, it's just the septic system.
That's a separate thing too.
Yeah, we're not allowed to take the septic systems into account because what would end up happening is you have a site like this where you have water coming into the site from a public source, and then you'd meet your recharge requirements just through the septic systems and therefore not have to manage stormwater on the site, which in my opinion isn't the correct way to do it because you have a surface water that your stormwater is discharging to, which is separate from your loading from the septic systems. We are close to an aquifer zone. We know that it bisects the site. We're outside of it with all of our recharge and septic system. But it is important to recharge that aquifer as well, even though you're taking water from off the site. You have to maintain that aquifer as well. So I don't think it would be the right approach to say, well, we meet our recharge requirements solely through septic systems and then not have to manage the stormwater aspect of it.
So you're not allowed to use that, you're not allowed to take that as part of your recharge or as part of, but do you have to account for it though? I mean.
Yes, he does, according to your town rules.
I don't have the exact regulation in front of me for that. When I reviewed it, that was not something that was in there. I'd have to go back and look at it, but I don't believe that there's a requirement for that.
It's right on the town website. And one other thing on HOAs, you may want to consult your town council. HOAs are supposed to be for public properties to maintain. The other thing is HOAs, according to mass law, go away in 30 years. They're done. They have to be redone. So if the people in the HOA decide they don't want to do it, what's the game plan for that?
They're required to have a responsibility.
Yeah, just we have.
They have to inform each other.
Yeah, they'd have to reestablish it. Can you say that over loud, Danielle? So-
They would have to form a new one. They can't just not have one. It would be, there has to be an HOA that's a responsible party, yeah.
Yeah, but mass law states they go away in 30 years.
There has to be one, so they would have to provide another one. They would have to reform in some way. I don't know about that 30-year rule. I can't speak to that, but if there was not one, there would have to be.
Well, I'm
one.
just suggesting that you check with town council and find out what the exact rules are before we move forward, because as we all just said, water is an issue on this property. My other question is, when GM2 was reviewing this, were they informed that almost everybody around this property is pumping water through sump pumps into the town stormwater system, which is already at max? And we've heard a couple people say they've actually seen water coming out of the storm drains instead of into them under heavy rainfalls.
Yeah, I think we established that there's a couple of places where it backs up, so. I don't think that's a surprise, but, you guys obviously knew that there was, that some of the people were dumping that sump pumps into the, yeah. So again, if it exists in condition.
Was GM2 who's reviewing this, were they informed of this? That's my question. Because you can make informed decisions as long as you have all the information. If you don't have all the information, it's very difficult to make an informed decision, okay? And you keep referring to, it's been reviewed by engineers, but there's a great show on TV, Engineering Catastrophes, and we don't need this to be one of those.
Yeah, we'll say this, that for the subdivision, when we go out, the town does peer review like a lot of towns. And Danielle went out and got an estimate for that, like we do with a subdivision, it was $8,500 for GM2, which we use. And so to date, we're basically double that right now. And that's, the applicant's paying for that. And much of that, over probably, I'd say 8 or 9 grand, is, I think, judiciously looking at all the different things that all of you and some that are online here have raised. They've been really legitimate things that you want them to look at. And every single one of them, Danielle has forwarded to them and they've reviewed it and responded. They are definitely aware of the situation on that street.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm
just saying it for
as long as
everybody.
Danielle's informed them about it. That's fine. And you know, of being an engineer, if you don't get all the information, it's hard to make a good decision.
I think it's fair, and we've said this before in the meetings too, is the way that, to be fair with GM2, the way they're reviewing the information that Bill, the civil licensed engineer in this case, has to provide him. This site needs to work on its own. And if there's other mitigating issues around it, that's definitely something to be taken in consideration. I'd say just for the purposes of contextualizing the $16,000 is the $8,000 was for the original review, which we planned on doing with any subdivision. The additional $8,000 was to field and further review all the things that really are outside of the application, the original application. All those problems are happening outside the site. And then as a practice, as Danielle's told me, we normally don't send a butter concerns and things like that to peer review. And in this case, we've done that for every single one of them. And again, I just point out, and we, meaning the taxpayers, all of us, aren't paying for that. It's the applicant that's paying for that. So they're paying like double to make sure that and they have no say in it. They can't influence GM2, but GM2 is looking at everything that you guys have forwarded to them, and made some very impassioned claims that we wanted to run down, so all I can say on that, I guess, if that's satisfactory or not.
Well,
Okay.
So the only thing I can see that is that he's brought up that is not has been anything done with is the prior test holes. And I'm not sure. Again, I believe that the context of that was you can't use them, but they're not using them.
Well, they don't know. I think, let's be honest, they don't know if they've, dug a test pit in an old disturbed test pit. They don't know that, but there was certainly no malicious intent to do that.
Yeah.
I think, you have fresh engineers go out there and maps out a totally different site plan and.
Right. In both cases,
I want to give the benefit, at least.
If I could just comment on that a little bit further. We probably could have actually used the old test pits if we had wanted to. There's no expiration on a test pit. I don't think it's wise to do that. So that's why we went out and did our own. But if we had talked to the Board of Health and got them in agreement, since they had already witnessed them, if they agree that the hydrology on the site was unlikely to have changed because there were no developments that were done in the area recently, they may have agreed that we could have used them because there is no expiration on it. The rules haven't changed since then. And further, nothing that I saw in those test pits would indicate that that area was dug in before, because generally they're not too careful when they're backfilling it. They kind of just push it all in and you get all the soil mixed together. And still, even if years after, you can walk through the woods and see some sinkholes where they are. It's fairly obvious where they are. And whenever I see that, I just avoid it because you end up with a whole mix of
Yeah,
soil,
you're
you
not gonna
can't see
get-
anything in it, so.
Extra on a gut.
I don't think there was a final clarification
I'm
on
sorry,
the
you have
type
to
of
say-
test pit.
I'm sorry, you have to say. it
David
again.
Cook, 346 Havel Street.
Because the recorder can't see you.
Understood. I don't think there was a final clarification, though. I know you said in practice versus what the rules are. I don't think there was a final clarification on the specific number of each type of test pit that.
So I
Richard
think
mentioned.
Phil can speak to this, but from what I understand, 27 total. And then they did the sewer, septic, for how many, 19, or how many were total?
For the septic test pits, there are a lot, yeah.
But what I mean is then the balance was the one per field or structure out there versus what, as Bruce correctly pointed out, there should be probably 3. So we're only, let's be all real here, we're dealing with 1 for those locations. But what they were seeing is a homogeneous section every time they put the shovel on the ground, even on the septic ones, you're getting the same profile, hidden groundwater 3, whatever, refusal and whatever. I mean, so it's, once you start doing that, you do start to back off how much you're gonna rip up the site. You're just getting so much consistency, so.
And when you spend, and having done this for a long time, you try to do too many test holes, you end up destroying the whole site, and then there's no consistency in the water flow anymore because you changed it all.
Well,
So
another thing too, just
reason to back off.
because I'm more on the construction side, I'm not civil, but is the other thing you're doing, if you want to put in foundations, you're disturbing where you want to bear on
Yeah.
potentially, so you're really making a mess for yourself. Because you're, again, like you said, you're throwing down those soils, you don't know where virgin is now, so you don't know where you want to put your footing, so you make a nightmare for your geotech. So I totally get what, like I said, in practice, that's what happened. I get the regs, but sometimes in the field, you have to make those decisions if you're doing that many test pits.
And then just to add to that a little bit too, I believe what you had said was correct earlier, where there's no differentiation between a test pit for drainage or a test pit for a septic system, but the intent of the regulation is
Where
that
it is, yeah.
you don't just dig for your septic system and then say, well, I'm putting this root dry well 60 feet away, but we'll use that same test pit anyways.
Right.
It's to have test pits in each footprint.
Right, exactly. Yeah, just physically, they're the same, what you're doing.
I see Mr. Leger's hand up on the Zoom. Mr. Leger's hand up is on the Zoom as well.
Okay, well, if Mr. Ted,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Luke Leger, McGregor, Leger, and Stevens. I represent David and Lauren Cook of 346 Haverhill Street. They abut the property directly to the east. I'd like to return to the discussion earlier on the waiver requests that the applicant has put to the commission. As you know, there are 3. And as you also know, the commission's regulations give you discretion to waive strict compliance with the regs and issue waivers where you find that those waivers would be in the public interest and consistent with the subdivision control law. And that makes sense because if you look at the very purpose stated for your regulations, it really all comes back to public health, safety, and welfare. So ultimately, that is the question for the commission to consider when thinking about whether to issue these waiver requests. Are these requests in the public interest? Would the waivers protect public health and safety? There's already been a decent amount of discussion about the waiver request for the looped water main. And as was stated earlier, in prior proposals to develop this property, there's always been a looped water main proposed. This is the first time we haven't seen that. And there are a couple different routes that those proposals have taken. One was from Haverhill Street connecting through the property down to Anthony Road. The other was to just loop around to Anthony Road. But there's a very good reason why your regulations call for a looped water main for dead-end streets greater than 500 feet, like the one that's proposed here. They're less vulnerable to breaking, looped water mains are. They provide better water quality. They're better for firefighting purposes. And there are other reasons too, I'm sure, but those are just a few of the obvious ones that all go directly to the issue of public health and safety. Here, the only reason given for the request is cost. And in our view, that is just not a legitimate reason to grant this waiver. Clearly, the looped water main that your regulations call for would be better for the public health and safety of the residents of this proposed subdivision and the other neighbors who live nearby. So in our view, that one should certainly be denied. Same for the other two waiver requests. One of those waiver requests is to allow for less fill to be placed over drain pipes. There's really no good reason given by the applicant for why that waiver is requested, in my view. It certainly would increase the risk of damage or failure for the proposed drainage system. We have heard time and again from residents who live in this neighborhood about the issues with flooding during even modest storm events. So anything that's going to increase the risk of damage to that drainage system should be denied. That waiver should not be allowed. It certainly is against public health and safety. Same with the third waiver request to allow them to get out from under the requirement for vertical granite curbing. There's really no good reason given for that. Vertical granite curbing certainly controls the flow of water better. It's going to better contribute to the collection and control of stormwater management on the property. And again, that is crucial for this project. The neighbors can't have been more clear with their significant existing problems around flooding due to stormwater and their very real and valid concerns about what this proposed development is going to do to exacerbate those problems. So all three of those waiver requests, in our view, should clearly be denied. There's no reason in our view that those should be allowed. A couple other comments that I just wanted to mention in reviewing the draft approval that's been posted online. It struck me that a few of the issues that have been discussed here at great length really aren't covered in there at all and certainly need to be considered. One of those would be the limit on fill. And as you know from our prior submittals, there is a pretty significant restriction on the amount of fill that can be brought in for use in wetlands on this property. That means the whole property. So we think it's extremely important to make sure that it's crystal clear that each of these individual lots would all be subject to that same restriction, that 1,800 square feet of fill remaining that's allowed applies across the entirety of this parcel, not just for the one of the individual lots. So that's a really crucial aspect of a restriction on this property that's not mentioned at all. Similarly, your peer reviewer has agreed that Aquifer Protection District approvals would apply to these individual lots moving forward. We've argued all along that we think that's certainly the case. The peer reviewer has agreed that yes, indeed, as these individual lots are put forth for development, they would be subject to restrictions as being within the Aquifer Protection District. So that's something that in our view also needs to be addressed in any decision by the board. And finally, not to belabor the point here, but you've heard a lot of concerns from the residents around the issue of a homeowners association essentially maintaining and being responsible for a large portion of the stormwater management system that's going to be ultimately treating stormwater for this project. And in our view, that really needs to be dealt with more head-on and more clearly in any decision, and not left to the neighbors to have to police later down the line. So those are just a few things that jumped out at me that I thought were really important to bring to the commission's attention in reviewing that draft approval before you close the hearing and consider it. Just to be clear, the issues that we have laid out in our written submittals to the commission and that I have presented to you previously during hearings still remain. As you know, we have raised a host of legitimate and valid concerns and in our view, really fundamental flaws with this project and its design relating to stormwater, flooding, drinking water quality, wetlands, and all of those issues still remain. But you've heard from me on those more than once, so I didn't want to go back over that.
I think we get the point here. However, I mean, some of the information you just brought up is not valid. This is not in the Aquifer Protection District, correct? Bill, you're outside of it?
There's a portion of the site that is, actually, I believe the entire site is, there's a portion of the site that's within a zone 2. We're outside of that. I believe the entire site is within the Aquifer Protection District, but we are well under the requirement Previously, the argument had been that we weren't taking the individual lots into account, which is not the case. We've taken them into account the entire time. And further, I'm just trying to look in this draft conditions, but the lots are 40,000 square foot minimum, and I believe the requirement is 15%, no more than 15% impervious, which would limit it to 6,000 square feet per lot. And I believe there's a condition in here that limits what we can do for impervious, which is well under
3,000.
yeah, I couldn't remember the exact number. So that's what I was looking for, but that's well under the 15%, and it's right in the conditions that we, and by that condition, we wouldn't be able to exceed that limit. So any way you want to cut it, we comply with that regulation. Yeah, 3,090 square feet per lot.
Exactly, that's close.
Plus or minus 500 square feet.
Right.
Yeah.
Item I, right?
Yeah. Okay, did you want to address any of the other, I mean, I think the rest of the things that we had were pretty much all repetitive of what we've already talked about. And by the way, we've not voted on any of the waivers yet, so.
I understand you haven't voted on them yet. I just wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to comment before the hearing closes.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dick Panaro, 14 Anthony Road. You had talked a lot about the HOA, and in terms of the responsibility of the HOA, they have to maintain the retention ponds, for example. How about the common areas that they have there? Are they responsible for those areas? For example?
Yeah, I would imagine, again, the homeowners association rules, they have to provide us with a set of rules and everything for the homeowners association. So that will be drawn up obviously by an attorney and everything, and approved and reviewed and approved by the town. I couldn't, if there's gonna be a homeowners association, I don't think there'd be one that did not include, go ahead.
So the homeowners association is required to do the stormwater maintenance that is specified in the operation and maintenance plan, but the town is not concerned with and can't be concerned with other regulations that the HOA can put in there as far as maintenance of other common areas. If it's not related to the stormwater and it's not called out in the O&M plan, the town has no jurisdiction. An HOA can say, you know, these are the colors you can paint your house, but we don't review that or approve that. It's only very specific to what's in
Well, I'm thinking about the common land that's around the road, going from Anthony Road up into the, heading north. There's gonna be a lot of open land there on both sides of that road, and they're responsible for that.
Yeah, I think I asked that question too about who that was.
Yeah, and it's not common land. The west side belongs to what we're calling lot 3. The right side would belong to what we're calling lot 1. And we did provide easements for maintenance. Our intent was to hand that over to the town, but it'll be handled by an HOA now.
Yeah. Did you catch all that?
So the property owner of those lots is responsible for that? Maintaining that?
Those parcels are gonna be attached to those lots on either side.
Okay.
And so they will of course be responsible for the maintenance. Yes, sir.
Jeff Jones, 16 Anthony Road. I want to just ask one question about the loop line again, not that you probably beat it to death, but just for a point of clarification. I know I asked this question before, and I think a long time ago, the fire department had some discussion about it, and I didn't see anything in the portal on an official thing from the fire department. I know there's something in there now from the water person that got in there and said basically, if I remember, the water person said, we can't require, nothing would make us require the loop. It's really a CPC requirement. It's up to you to make that decision. So I actually called the fire department yesterday and talked to someone in the chief's office, and they seemed, at least my impression was they seemed like they were still kind of thinking about it, and they were trying to get in touch with, I think, Danielle. And I don't know if they ever did, or if there's anything you can add to that, or I'd like to see something in writing from the fire department, and if they're saying, we don't care, it's fine, then they know more than me, but.
What you get from the fire department, they have to do a fire flow test, so that fire flow test is, shows that there's adequate water and pressure and everything, so that's something that they do require. You know, some of the, even before I was on this board, there were a lot of these rules and regulations that were put there almost expressly for density control. And that's why the water department doesn't care about the water looping, and the fire department just wants water to be available. But I don't know if you're aware that Elm Street is probably a 3 or 4 mile dead end. And yet they got adequate water flow, clean water, and everything. You know what I mean? So I mean, to say that the 100 feet of pipe is gonna make a difference, not so much.
Danielle, what was the conversation you had with them?
I was contacted by Chief Stats and Deputy Galvin. I think they were just asking me what the question was about. They had already given us a memo on this subdivision and they hadn't addressed it. They also don't have a requirement for water looping. They were just asking me about what the nature of their, question was. I explained the history of how we have a regulation, the water department doesn't have a regulation, how it comes up if we are asked to waive it. But they didn't give me any concerns that they had, and they didn't in their original memo either.
We have certainly had subdivisions where the water looping was provided a benefit, but there's one that we put, that we had to go through the wetlands and put a pipe in, and afterwards was like, what have we done? That was a dumb thing, because if anything happens now, somebody's got to go in and tear the wetlands up to fix the pipe. It was not a good idea. But we were thinking that we had to do it, but we don't. So again, being practical about the whole thing sometimes, as our older town engineer said, you really need to think about these things before you put them in the ground, because once they're there, you got to take care of them. And so do what you need, but don't do what you don't need.
The reason why I asked the question was because I know last time we talked about the water, and I think you had a conversation, but it was sort of an informal one, but at least now there's something in writing from the water department on the issue. So to me, it seemed like the water department and the fire department are the two players that you want to have some kind of feedback with. And I didn't know if they were going to provide something in writing or they don't have to.
They don't.
They're not.
They didn't ask for it.
If they thought there was going to be a problem, they would have brought it to us. They've always been very good about that, about telling us if they have something that they think is a problem. Yes.
Brian Hash, 7 Warren. When the subdivision control law came into effect, each town and city had the opportunity to come up with their rules and regulations as it relates to the subdivision control law. The town of operating town meeting accepted these R&Rs, of which 500 feet on a dead-end street was one of those regulations. Why did they do this?
Density control.
So there was a rationale there for them.
Yep, the rationale was that they were afraid that they would, that they didn't want to build too many houses because they were scared to death that the school department would never be able to handle the kids. And that actually became a fact. When I went to school, I went double session in North Reading because they had.
So why did the town meeting change that if that's changed,
Because
situation
it's not a law, it's a regulation that we're allowed to apply. It gives us the option of applying it. And as I said, there were situations where it was in fact a really good idea. But that's not always the case. So we have it as a tool in our tool bag, if you will.
I was on the board, I know.
Yep.
Okay.
How many waivers did you give?
Huh?
If you look back.
Maybe 2.
But I mean, again,
and they weren't 80% more.
Yeah, but you gave them because it was the right thing to do for that.
But it wasn't a financial decision.
We're not making.
You know, I'm liaison to the ZBA, and the ZBA grants variances left and right for people to violate setbacks, everything, and almost 100% of the time it's for financial reasons. It's a hardship. You can't build one way or the other.
But that's to an individual taxpayer.
I know, but I'm just saying it's our regs, and we passed that years and years ago, but we on every 2 weeks violate it profusely, you know.
I'm not sure that's something that typically that happens when the butter doesn't have an issue though.
Yeah, and then the butter leaves.
Well,
What's the next guy? I mean, we should be thinking long term for everything, but what I mean is, we're not knocking that. I'm just saying we do it throughout the whole town. The town, different boards are using discretion left and right.
Yeah.
You know, and they're using regs as a guideline and then interpreting them based on the project or the circumstances.
Yeah.
Not saying that variances shouldn't be granted.
Right.
But
Okay, is anything, any further, anything new? We have a hand up, okay.
Yes,
please.
hi, Michelle Da Silva Martins, 19 Mohawk Road. I am going to piggyback on Attorney Legier's waivers. I know that is not a topic. However, I also would like to be on the record specifically for the waiver of curbing. The drainage.
Yeah, we haven't voted on the waiver yet, so.
I understand, however, I just would like to be on the record to make it known that the curbing waiver, I would use your discretion for it to be denied. That is something that will significantly affect my property as not of the flow of the water that's going to be going downhill from the cul-de-sac. And so for purposes of use of my property and depreciation value of my property as a result of land that I would not be able to use, I would be asking that the curbing waiver be denied for that reason. And also request that the HO maintenance be further clarified in your final draft of approval.
Okay, thank you. Again, the homeowners association is going to be written and provided to us by an attorney and will be reviewed by us for completeness. So we don't have that in front of us, so I can't make any changes to something I don't have yet. So it's a relatively standard situation. Anytime we had a homeowners association, it's always worked out. So it's nothing new. All right, anything further? All right, thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing. And we will take a look at this and take a look at our words. Oh, street name.
no, it's just in this.
You haven't named the street. So I would guess that we gave you a list of some historical names that we have. So we have, it's not a final list. I mean, if you have if you had a name that you liked for that particular location, we like it to have some significance in the area.
Was
Yeah.
So maybe I kind of missed it right along, but I kind of thought the plan right along was on the plan was to name it Germano Drive. It wasn't until a few days ago, really, the discussion of this kind of got sent.
Yeah.
I kind of was looking for it. It's obviously everyone's discussed. It's been a long time between, had a couple uncles pass away through the process. My grandfather take care of all of them. I kind of wanted to try and name it kind of remembrance. My last name's Cataldo, it's not really after me. I don't know, I didn't really have a chance to put much thought into the name. The names, nothing really jumped out at me on the short list provided. I don't know how it goes. goes about as far as approving or denying, if it has to do for this and objection. I wasn't aware an historical name had to be picked. I didn't even know why some of those are historical, like Frank Lane. I don't know what the criteria is for the names.
You remember Campbell, but that was it is very historic. Campbell.
Yeah, no, I didn't really have much time to talk to anybody about what the requirements are for a name.
Danielle, what is it? What are the requirements?
The CPC can decide, and usually you go with something that has some kind of significance to the area, whether it's a historical person or, but it really is the CPC's discretion. If you haven't made a decision about the street name, it doesn't need to be made at the time of the vote is taken. It can be made later prior to plan endorsement. We've done that before.
The CPC still has the ability to approve that, though, right?
Yes.
Okay.
The only time the CPC then loses the ability to name the street is after if it is accepted in the future. At that time, it becomes the select board first.
Do you think we could do an interim name or something, and then or would you suggest that we just wait until we pick one?
I wouldn't put one thing on the plan and then change it. I think it would confuse things. So if you want to just wait until endorsement but discuss it, that's fine.
I put a little time into that, see what you can come up with as soon as possible.
All right, thank you.
You don't even want any because one of the things we gotta do right off, of course, is put a sign up and everything, so that if there's any kind of an emergency, that the fire department knows where to go.
Have you in the audience seen the names that are being suggested? Is that on the drive or?
It's in the in-packet materials. I can read them off.
Just for purposes of the audience here, I understand the sun. I can go ahead.
Okay,
Make a motion.
make a motion. Yeah, why do you just?
Yeah, but waivers after.
No.
First.
Yeah.
Waiver started. Yeah, no.
So I would vote on the waivers and then I would vote on the.
Got it.
That's what it
Because these are part, okay.
Okay, what's the first?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the CPC vote to either grant or deny a waiver from section 350-14E3 to allow for a deed and road that exceeds 500 feet without a loop water main. The proposed road is 813 feet in length as measured in accordance with chapter 350. And that's it, sorry, that's it.
Oh, okay.
Can we make a second on that? I've never done one of these.
Well,
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean,
We're
Jeremiah has to make a second.
Yes, yeah, I did.
Deny, or you, or the motion, you get, I'm making the motion, he has to second the motion and then we'll vote, right?
Yeah.
But it's a way.
So you make it in the affirmative and then you vote either yes or no.
Right.
Make it, so why don't you do that?
That'll make it
Read the motion as an approved and then.
to approve?
Yes.
No, okay. And then Mr. Chairman, I move that the CPC vote to grant waiver from section 350-14E3 to allow for a dead end road that exceeds 500 feet without a loop water main. The proposed road is 813 feet in length and is as measured in accordance with chapter 350.
Okay.
Second.
You said a second? Okay, all in favor, Jeremiah?
Aye.
Okay, and myself, aye, Dave,
Aye.
okay. Second one, read it so they know it, so we know what it is.
Okay, and again, it's a motion to deny or?
The motion is to grant, and then.
Motion to grant.
Yeah.
So then it's a yes, or no, I just want to make sure, okay. I move that the CPC grant a waiver for the town of North Reading typical road section to allow for a minimum cover over drain pipes to be reduced from 3 feet to 2 feet for the 12-inch RCP between PCB 8 and PDMH 6 and PCB 7 and PDMH 6, as well as the pipe run from PCB 1 and PCB 2 to the existing Anthony Road drainage system.
Seconded.
Okay. And, how say you, Jeremiah?
Nay.
Nay? And myself is aye, Dave?
I say aye.
Yeah. That's a practicality thing. The existing inverts are such that you couldn't put it deeper because you can't make the water go up there. So. Okay, third one.
Okay, that the CPC vote to grant a waiver from the town of North Reading typical road section to allow for the use of Cape Cod berm in place of vertical granite curb to match the existing bituminous curbing in Anthony Road.
Seconded.
Okay, Jeremiah, how say you?
Nay.
Okay, Dave?
Nay.
And myself, nay. So, we think the granite curbing is, pretty important. Because when those roads get plowed, sometimes that granite curb, the Cape Cod berm curbing could get pushed away, and then the water will escape from the road. The granite curb guarantees that everything goes to the drainage structures as it's supposed to. So, we need to see that on this particular site. Okay. Okay, so, the main.
Nay.
Huh?
The main one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why this is not come up here.
I'm right here.
All right, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Community Planning Commission vote to approve the plan entitled Definitive Subdivision Plans, 17 Anthony Road in 346R Havel Street. In parentheses here, partial 213-30-61 and 213-4725, North Reading, Massachusetts, dated 12/6/2022, last revised 8/18/2023, drawn by Civil Design Consultants, Inc., subject to the terms and conditions of their certificate conditional approval dated October 3rd, 2023, as amended this evening.
Seconded.
Okay. Jeremiah, how say you?
Aye.
And myself, aye. Dave?
Aye.
Okay, that's very show three in favor, no opposed. Thank you all very much. I think you'll find this will work out pretty good. I certainly hope the developer stays in touch with you, so you all have a chance to, if you have any issues, to get them to them as soon as possible. But again, having done this for a long time and seeing what proper engineering and proper construction can do for a site, you might find that there's an improvement to your situation as opposed to the negative way. But I still thank you all very much. We do value, as Dave pointed out, we do value your input, and we did take it and send it to the peer review engineer. We did put a lot of time into this to make sure that everything is done it best possible.
And I want to just say too, Mr. Chairman, that I think Ed Sapienza's recommendation for a liaison is very, very good idea. You should strongly think about that. And again, amongst yourself, I don't know if you want to be that person, Ed, or whatever, but that way you have a really good conduit of communication back to all the owners. I think that'll smooth things out a lot, really will.
Yeah. Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.